How many times in your genealogy research have you hit that brick wall, not really sure what to do next, desperately seeking that next piece of your family history puzzle? Well, in this video, I'm sharing with you 20 of my favorite genealogy websites and resources across 4 different categories. Hey there, if we haven't met before, I'm Lisa with Are You My Cousin, and this YouTube channel is designed to help you find your ancestors, grow your family tree, but not be overwhelmed in the process. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, you're in the right place. Now, whether you are a beginner researcher or you've been researching for quite a while, I've got something for you in this particular video. I've got 4 different genealogy research categories that I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite genealogy resources. So we're going to be talking about my 5 favorite free genealogy resources, my 5 favorite paid or subscription genealogy resources, my 5 favorite resources for utilizing social history in your genealogy research, and my 5 favorite Google tools that I use in my genealogy research. Yep, it's an eclectic group of resources, but I think I've got something here for everyone from beginner to seasoned pro. So let's get started. Now in this first category, I'm talking about my top 5 favorite free genealogy research tools. So these are all free, no charge here to use. Now my first one, of course, is Family Search, one of the big 4 genealogy databases that are out there. It is free to use. It is a fabulous resource for genealogy researchers. It's often one of the first places that we go and start that genealogy research, right? Now, next up, one that I've been using quite a bit lately is the Internet Archive. Now, the Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library offering free books and other types of media. Now, as a researcher, what I'm typically finding and using over there are family history books, so previously published family history books. I find general history books that I might be using in my research. I find things such as city directories, old city directories, and even digitized family Bibles that are there. So the Internet Archive is definitely one that you want to check out. And by the way, any of the sites and resources that I mention, I will have a link to them in the description below. Now, number 3 on my free genealogy resource list is actually Archive Grid. Now, it's actually not even a genealogy specific research tool, but it is one that I have talked about a lot. It is one that I use in pretty much every project that I research on. Now, Archive Grid is a finding aid, and it allows me special collections and repositories across the US and around the world. So this is a fabulous resource for us that we can use as researchers to seek out information in repositories that we may not have ever thought to look in. Now, I do have a full blog post and article on using Archive Grid as part of your genealogy research over on the Are You My Cousin website, and I will have a link to that in the description below as well. Now, number 4 on my free genealogy resources is to make use of any of the state archives digital collections. Now, many state archives have growing collections of digital records they have online for us to use as researchers. And we really, as genealogy researchers, cannot afford to overlook these digital collections. This is allowing us to research from a distance information about our ancestors that, well, not that many years ago, we would have had to make an actual visit to the archives to research. And that, well, may have not been possible. So now that many of the collections are starting to be digitized, it does give us as researchers that opportunity to search records we previously could not have done. And my 5th favorite free genealogy resource these days is Chronicling America. Now, Chronicling America is a free newspaper site that we can search. And you know, I am loving newspaper research. And one of the things, while I use Archive Grid extensively in my genealogy research, I do use other newspaper collections, and I'll talk about one for a little bit later, because there is no one place to look for newspapers and do your newspaper research. There are so many out there that we do have to make choices, but this is one that we can start with, and it is free for us to search. This next category are my 5 favorite paid resources that I use when it comes to genealogy research. Now, the first one I use is Ancestry.com. Obviously, it is one of the largest genealogy databases out there, and so I do use this one extensively as well. Number 2, and again, there is no particular order here. These are just the ones that I do use pretty much on a daily basis, and that would be MyHeritage as well. MyHeritage is another large genealogy database collections they have around the world, as well as they've recently launched the oldnews.com. So they have a large collection of historic newspapers that we can now add additionally to our research. Find My Past. Again, I have a lot of UK and Irish genealogy that I need to research. Definitely Find My Past is right up there, one of my favorites for diving into some of those ancestral lines that I have. All of these genealogy databases, Ancestry, MyHeritage, Find My Past, I use them extensively. I use them on a regular basis, and I have for years, but they have continued to be my favorite ones that I use. Now, as I mentioned previously, I love newspaper research. In fact, researching in newspapers and pulling the stories from the newspaper has been instrumental in helping me break down genealogy brick walls. Now, yes, Chronicling America is my favorite free site. Newspapers.com is one of my favorite newspaper paid sites that I use regularly. Now, there is no one place to go. I feel like as researchers, to be really comprehensive, I need to use both free and paid types of newspaper sites to research. I think that's to be able to be inclusive and to be comprehensive in my genealogy research. And so, yes, I've been using newspapers.com a lot this year. It is one of my go-to resources that I use on a weekly basis. And next up is the New England Historic Genealogical Society, found at AmericanAncestors.org. Now, they provide a wealth of resources when it comes to researching our ancestors in both the United States and Canada, particularly in the Northeast. And it's that collection, and it's those extensive collections for that Northeast that have been particularly helpful in my own personal genealogy research as well. Okay, so here are my top 5 favorite sites that I'm using currently when it comes to learning more about social history and incorporating social history and local events into my ancestors' lives. Okay, so let's get social. Understanding the social history behind our ancestors is key to painting a fuller picture of their lives and, well, moving our research forward. So the first site that I use when it comes to seeking out more about social history and understanding what was happening in my ancestors' life, well, is Google Books. Now, Google Books is one of my favorite resources for all types of books that I can use in my genealogy research, especially in seeking out pertinent social history topics. Now, I like to look for county and local histories. So an example of a book that I found recently was The History of Halifax County by W.C. Allen. And another example of a book that I've used in the past is called Old Churches, Ministers, and Families of Virginia by William Mead. Now, you may not find the names of your ancestors mentioned specifically in these types of books. In fact, you probably won't, but you will learn about the area where they lived and what was important to the community. Now, next up is the Internet Archive. Now, I did mention it's one of my favorite free sites that I've been using, but it's definitely one I wanted to include here in the social history section as well, because the types of books that I'm exploring, again, similar to Google Books, would be published family histories, and I'm looking for things such as local and county histories. I'm also looking for city directories as well as yearbooks that can be found here. Next up, the Federal Writers Project. Now, the Federal Writers Project spans years from 1889 all the way up to 1942. It is part of a larger government project called the U.S. Works Projects Administration Federal Writers Project and Historical Records Survey. So it's a long name. I just call it the Federal Writers Project. It contains 2,900 documents. It spans 24 states, and it records the stories of ordinary men and women who lived at the turn of the 20th century. And that's the power where we can really discover some really relevant social history and understanding what these individuals may have been experiencing during that time period. Next up is the New York Public Library Collection. Now, this is one you don't want to miss, guys. It is another free collection as well. Now, this collection covers much more than just the New York area. In fact, I have found references and pertinent materials for North Carolina ancestors within this collection. Even if you don't research ancestors in the New York area, you definitely want to put this one on your list to check as well. Now, this last one in this social history grouping is called HistoryNet. Finding articles on different time periods and regions throughout history is helpful in understanding what our ancestors may have been experiencing during a particular time in history in a particular location. Now, HistoryNet is a fairly new to me website. I'm still exploring it, but I'm finding that I'm really enjoying reading the different articles and understanding what was happening at the time. And I'm able to understand, well, maybe why my ancestors made the decisions that they made decisions to stay in an area, made decisions to leave an area. But when I understand what was happening at that local government or even the national governmental level, I can understand a little bit more about my ancestor. And the better I know my ancestor, the better my chance is to find them. Now, this last category that we're going to talk about is Google Tools. Now, I am a big fan of using Google Tools when it comes to my genealogy research. Obviously, they are not genealogy specific, but you may have noticed a little bit of a theme as I've talked, in the fact that many of the favorite sites that I use, both free, paid, or surrounding social history, and again here in Google Tools, are tools that are not specific to genealogy research. They can be used for, well, just about anything or other historical type of research, but they're not necessarily genealogy specific. That's okay. I think as researchers, when we can use these other tools to better our research, we're absolutely going to, number one, improve our own genealogy research skills, as well as have better chance to find our ancestors. So let's talk about the Google tools that I'm using. I have 5 that I use frequently. I do incorporate in a lot of my research. Now, the first one I mentioned briefly earlier is Google Books. I do use Google Books regularly in pretty much all of my genealogy research projects. At some point, I'm going to dive into Google Books. Now, additionally, we were talking about them a bit a moment ago in the social history, but there are other things that I would probably seek out when it comes to Google Books. Number one, pretty much are going to be statute books. Okay, this is not genealogy 101, guys. This is much more advanced, but sometimes you have to understand the laws of what was happening in an area. So I'm going to seek out books that might pertain to laws, and so that I can make sure I'm interpreting wills and documents correctly, those legal documents correctly. Definitely, I look and use for, I have bookmarked the Black's Law Dictionary, the second edition there in Google Books, because I want to make sure I understand the terminology of any of the genealogy records that I'm reading. I need to make sure I understand the terminology. And so I use the Black's Law Dictionary, that second edition. Next up, I also use Google Sheets extensively. Now, Google Sheets, that is basically a spreadsheet. And so I use these spreadsheets to, one, create my research plans, but I also use the spreadsheets. This is where I create a lot of my timelines as well. So I typically have Google Sheets, some type of timeline or research plan for pretty much every research project that I'm working on within my Google Drive system. That leads us into my next favorite, which is Google Drive. Now, this is the cloud storage for Google, and I use it extensively. This is where I keep all of the documents that I create. I create my timelines that are kept there. I can store my documents, and anything that pertains to my project, I can store it in my Google Drive. Now, why Google Drive? Why? Because number one, it's free. Number two, it syncs across all of my devices. So it doesn't matter if I'm researching on my laptop, if I'm researching, I need to do a quick lookup on my phone or even my iPad. Google Drive will sync across all of my devices, and I'm able to access the information regardless of what device I have in my hands at the moment. And because I have everything accessible at a given moment through Google Drive, well, I am ready to research at the drop of a hat. Now, next up would be Google Keep. Google Keep is a note-taking app. So what types of things do I keep here and take notes on? So I have one that's just kind of a running list of as research ideas pop in my head, and maybe I'm not able to actually act on them at the moment. I'll just make a quick note in Google Keep on one of the notes that I have there. I also can keep checklists here. I'll create a book list. So if I'm somewhere I know that I've been keeping a list of books that I need to purchase or to seek out, I will keep a list of things that perhaps I need to purchase for my genealogy office or that next genealogy road trip that I'm going to take. I can keep a checklist there as well. Now, once again, like all the Google tools, it will sync across all of my devices, so I can access it on my laptop or my iPad or my cell phone. But the biggest thing here is I'm not left looking for paper and pencil, which I probably don't have in my purse anyway, to make a note and try to remember something. I can pull out my phone, I can very quickly make that little note to myself, and so then I don't lose that thought in my head. Now, the fifth tool that I use is Google Photos as well. So this is a great way for me to, number one, back up my photos, but it's also an area where I can create different photo albums, different family albums, and they are quite easy to share by simply grabbing the link and then sharing that link to that album out. Very easy for me to organize and share my family photos. So there you have it. We've got 4 categories, my 5 favorite resources under each one, and I hope that you have found a new to you resource that you can use in your research as well. Now, I want to make sure that you are finding all those fantastic resources and new to you websites that are out there, and so I would love for you to watch this next video that I've picked out for you, especially called 5 websites professional genealogists use to research ancestors for free.